use of a computer for what it is in a school. The important thing is that there are a few exceptions, but in general, the entire way of thinking about what computing is about is way off. But this is incredibly satisfying. And it's much more insidious than air guitar, where it's quite apparent that there is no guitar there. Although if you remember The Emperor's New Clothes, you can actually go quite a ways without something there. And Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer, had a great line. He said, "The bull wears itself out on the cape and fails to see the sword." That's what's going on. So this is one way of thinking about what is absolutely a lead pipe cinch over the next 30 years. So this is one large thing that is much easier to predict. I'm famous for a line which will probably go on my tombstone called "The best way to predict the future is to invent it." But if you think about it, the easiest way to predict the future is to prevent it. Right? That's generally what's happening. So in fact, things aren't much different than they were 30 years ago. Or in fact, going back 50 years ago when the U.S. was frightened of Sputnik and decided to do the largest educational reform this country has ever seen, lavishly funded with the best people in Washington, D.C., and they did great stuff in the 60s. And none of that stuff, literally none of that great stuff, which was put into tens of thousands of schools, survives today. Some of it was knocked down by fundamentalism. Some of it was just absorbed and changed. Some of it, the labels, for instance, one of the changes from that time is the word arithmetic got changed into the word mathematics. But the content didn't change. They were having, the idea is that kids must learn mathematics. And so after grinding and grinding and grinding and learning ways of teaching it, and Papert was part of that revolution, eventually the system gave up but claimed victory by just changing the labels. And that is a favorite thing in our society. Okay, if you study anthropology, you'll know that anthropologists, among other things, study about 3,000 traditional cultures. And one of the deductions in traditional cultures that is found virtually everywhere is something like kings are natural and normal. And every once in a while, an unusual idea came along. For instance, Tom Paine wrote a book, little pamphlet called Common Sense, which was actually a joke because the contents of it are uncommon sense. And one of the things he leads the readers about 20 pages into this 40-page little book is, hey, we can design a society much better than what we've thought is natural. They were realizing that a lot of good things were actually artificial. They came from the mind of man rather than out of our genes. They didn't think of it quite that way. And so Tom Paine had this great line. He said, instead of having the king be the law, we can have the law be the king. In other words, we can design a much better society than any monarchy, and we can institute it in law and a structure. So now an unusual idea is not the same as a powerful idea. So this is an insight. And this insight was critical to the foundation of the United States. But the powerful idea came a few years later when the Constitution was put together. And essentially the Constitution embodies the powerful idea that society can be shaped into a self-organizing, self-correcting shared idea and resource system. And in fact, this idea was borrowed from the understanding of what science was looking to be in the 18th century. So I'm not going to talk much about this, but this is the underlying context for this talk. That is, when all is said and done, when we actually put our concern to children, the most important thing that we have to think about is this statement of Jefferson. He was asked, haven't we set up a really shaky idea? We've set up a republic here, but we've in fact put the basis of the republic on the entire population. And this is one of my favorite paragraphs. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. And this is what public education in the United States was set up to be. You can't find a teacher, hardly, or even a principal, or somebody on a school board who even knows this anymore. They think schooling is set up for vocational training or for dealing with social problems or et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, what it all comes down to is that the only way we are given to deal with the main problem of a republic, which is how do you get rid of the representatives, not how do you get them in, but how do you get them out, is that we have to vote them out. And we have to do that with a population that is in the same conversation as the upper level conversation of the society itself. So this is a very tricky idea. And the reason it's tricky is because, going back to anthropologists again, if you're interested in this, you can type in human universals into Google, and you'll find, among other things, a book by Brown, an anthropologist. And Brown and other people have been writing down things that have been found in every traditional society that has been studied. So this is from about 3,000 traditional societies, and about 300 things that are never absent have been found. I've just put a few here. And by the way, for marketing people in the room, if you want to make money, make it. Okay. All you have to do is pick any one of those things and make an amplifier for it, technological amplifier for it, and you can't lose. Because these are the things we want. We are born wanting something to fill in these slots. You can think of these as parameters. We're not born knowing what language we want to learn, but we're born wanting to learn a language. We don't know what stories we're going to learn, but we're born wanting to learn stories. So one way to think about this is these are the things that we have strong tendencies. We're strongly disposed to want to fill these things in. And if you want to do a movie that everybody likes, pick out things like, well, pick out non-equal rights and how those trade off. Pick out religion, magic, superstition, quick reactions to patterns, vendetta. When's the last time you saw a movie that didn't have some vigilante theme in it? We just love those because we're set up to love them. Okay, so these things are relatively easy to learn. So here I've divided the human population into 4 little bundles. Over on the right, a group for any, this is for any given thing. There will be a group that's very strongly disposed towards it, can pretty much pick it up from the environment. There's another group that needs some help, another group that needs a lot of help. There's a group that we don't know how to help. Doesn't matter what it is. And for the universals that I just showed you, basically the distribution in the population is kind of like this. Virtually all of those universals are just picked up in societies that don't have schools or whether they do have schools. It doesn't matter. Because these are the things we're set up. We look for how they're realized in the culture around us, and we just pick the stuff up that way. Okay, now the last, the female mitochondrial DNA, it's been traced back now. Looks like modern humans might have been on the planet for about 193,000 years. And for virtually all of that time, more than 90% of the time, we didn't do a lot. So agriculture was invented about 8% or so of the last few years, and writing lower and lower, and we can see down there that the U.S. Constitution